Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You have heard that line. Maybe you have prayed it. It is the most repeated sentence in the Hebrew Bible, and it opens with a command so plain in English that nobody stops on it. Hear. Fine. My ears work. Next verse. But the word standing at the front of that sentence is Shema. And in biblical Hebrew, Shema does not mean what hear means in English. According to the standard lexicons, Shema covers hearing, listening, paying attention, understanding, and obeying. All of it. One verb. The King James translators rendered it hear roughly 785 times, hearken roughly 196 times, and flat out obey roughly 81 times. Same word every time. And they had to keep switching for a reason. Biblical Hebrew has no ordinary standalone verb that means to obey, the way English does. When Hebrew was revived as a spoken language in the modern era, a word had to be borrowed from Aramaic, letzayet, to fill that hole. Slowly, because an army needs it. So across the entire Hebrew Bible, when God wants obedience, he asks you to hear, which means the sentence you have probably said out loud, I heard God on this, I just haven't done anything about it yet, is a sentence the Hebrew has no room for. Now, before that lands too heavily, this is not a video about how you are failing. It is a video about a translation gap that has quietly reshaped what Christians think listening even is. I am going to walk you through 6 specific ways we hear God wrong, what Shema says about each one, and one concrete thing to do instead. By the end, Deuteronomy 6 is going to read like a different verse than the one you memorized. My name is Khalib, and pulling words like this one back out of the Hebrew is what we do here. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, leave a comment and consider subscribing. It really does help. Now, let's go stand in the field where that sentence was first spoken. Deuteronomy is a farewell speech. Moses is on the east side of the Jordan, on the plains of Moab, and he is not going across. In front of him is a generation that grew up in the wilderness. They buried their parents in sand. They've never plowed a field, never lived in a house, never fought a real war for land. And Moses does not give them a new law. He repeats the old one. He goes back over everything they already know, because the danger ahead is not that they will forget the commandments. It is that they will remember them and stop listening. So he picks a verb and he hammers it. Some form of Shema shows up in Deuteronomy roughly 92 times. For comparison, it appears only about 6 times in the whole book of Leviticus. Deuteronomy is the listening book, and it opens its most famous line with the word as a command. Shema Israel. Not understand Israel. Not agree Israel. Hear. Which in his language already means, and then move. Here is how we get that wrong. Number 1, you wait until you feel it before you do it. This one disguises itself as sincerity. You are not being rebellious. You are being careful. You do not want to act on the wrong impulse, so you hold the instruction and wait for the internal confirmation, the peace, the nudge, the certainty. Go back to Sinai for a second. In Exodus 24:7, Moses reads the covenant out loud, and the people answer with 2 Hebrew words, Naaseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. In that order. Jewish commentators have argued about that sentence for centuries, and some read the two words as a single idea. We will obediently do. Either way, nobody in that sentence is waiting to feel ready. Waiting for the feeling sounds humble, but it slowly makes your obedience weather-dependent. It teaches you that God's word is a suggestion, pending your emotional approval. So, do this. Pick the last clear instruction you received. Not the newest, most interesting one. The last clear one. The apology, the phone call, the boundary, the giving. Do it this week, before you ask God for anything else. When you stop waiting to feel it, you find out that clarity usually shows up on the far side of obedience, not in front of it. Number 2, you treat hearing itself as the finish line. James saw this coming. James 1:22 tells believers to be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving themselves. The Greek word behind hearer there is akrates, a hearer in the sense of someone sitting in on a lecture. An auditor. Somebody taking in the material without being enrolled in the consequences. And notice what happens when the New Testament reaches for a word for obedience. It uses hypakuo, which is built from under and hear. Literally to hear from underneath. Hebrew and Greek build obedience out of the same raw material. Hearing. Which means a life made entirely of input has a name in both languages, and it is not listening. It opens the door to something exhausting, constant spiritual consumption with no exit. More sermons, more podcasts, more notes, and no change you could name out loud. So do this. 1 sentence per sermon. 1 sentence per chapter. Write it down as an action with a day attached to it, not as an insight. If you cannot turn it into a sentence with a verb in it, you did not hear it yet. You audited it. When your intake starts producing output, the word stops being content and starts being a voice. Chapter point 3. You listen for a voice when God has already given you words. Nobody admits to this one because it feels like faith. You are waiting on God. You want to be sure. You are asking for a sign about a decision the Bible has already spoken to plainly. In 1 Samuel 3, a boy who has never heard from God gets woken up 3 times. When Eli finally figures out what is happening, he tells Samuel what to say, and Samuel says it. Speak, for your servant hears. That last word is shomea, from Shema, in the form of an ongoing posture. Not, your servant will consider it. Your servant is, right now, in the position of one who hears. Here is the quiet cost of listening only for the dramatic voice. It lets you stay in permanent consultation. You never disobey, technically. You just never arrive. So do this. Before you ask God for direction on a decision, name every command that already apply to it. Honesty, faithfulness, generosity, forgiveness. Write them out. Most decisions get significantly smaller once the commands that already apply are on the table. When you handle the words He already gave, you become the kind of person He can say something new to. Number 4. You ask for wisdom when what you actually need is a hearing heart. This is Solomon's moment, and most of us have it slightly wrong. In 1 Kings 3:9, God tells him to ask for anything, and the King James says Solomon asked for an understanding heart. The Hebrew underneath is lev shomea, a hearing heart. From Shema again. Solomon did not ask to be smart. He asked to be able to hear. He was about to govern a nation, and what he wanted was an ear. Praying only for answers keeps you in the position of a man asking for directions from a car with the windows up. You want the outcome without the ongoing reception. So do this. Change one line in the way you pray this week. Instead of, God, tell me what to do, try, God, give me a hearing heart. Then leave a gap in the prayer and do not fill it with more words. 2 minutes of silence is enough to notice how uncomfortable that is. When you start asking for the ear instead of the answer, you stop needing a crisis to make you pray. Number 5, you substitute the offering for the ear. Saul is the case study. God gave him a specific instruction, and Saul carried out most of it and kept the best of the livestock to sacrifice them. It was a genuine offering. It was expensive. It just was not the instruction. Samuel's answer in 1 Samuel 15:22 is one of the sharpest lines in the Old Testament. To obey is better than sacrifice. And the word behind obey there is, once again, Shema. To hear is better than sacrifice. This is the most respectable failure on the list, because from the outside, it looks like devotion. You serve more, you volunteer more, you give more, and the volume of the activity is loud enough to cover the one thing you are not doing. So do this. Ask yourself one uncomfortable question and answer it honestly. What am I doing for God that God did not ask me to do? And what is it letting me avoid? Then trade 1 hour of the first thing for the second thing. When the activity gets quieter, the instruction gets audible again. Chapter 6. You hear it once and file it as heard. This is the last one and the most common. God speaks, it lands. You are moved. And then Tuesday happens. And by the following Sunday, it is a warm memory instead of a working command. Look at what Deuteronomy 6 does immediately after the Shema. Verses 6 through 9 say to keep these words on your heart. Teach them diligently to your children, and talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk on the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Sitting, walking, lying down, getting up. That is not a devotional slot. That is the entire day, on repeat. Jeremiah chapter 23 has God summarizing the whole covenant in one line. Listen to my voice, and I will be your God. And the very next verse says, they did not listen. Same verb both times. The failure was not a missing revelation. It was a missing rhythm. So do this. Attach the sentence you wrote down to something that already repeats. The commute, the kettle, the walk to the car. Repetition is not a lack of faith. In Deuteronomy, repetition is the form obedience takes. When a word gets a rhythm, it stops being an event and becomes a life. Now, one honest note before we close, because this deserves it. You will hear people say flatly that biblical Hebrew contains no word for obedience, and some scholars would push back on that. Hebrew has other ways to talk about compliance. Shema, to keep or guard the commandments. Asa, to do. Avad, to serve. And in a lot of passages, the obedience sense of Shema comes from the full phrase, listen to the voice of, rather than from the bare verb, sitting alone. That is a fair correction, and it is worth holding. But notice what survives it. Even the scholars who nuance the claim agree that translators still had to render this one verb as obey roughly 81 times, because the context demanded it. And Deuteronomy still stacks the word up about 92 times while asking for a changed life. However you handle the grammar, in this language, hearing and doing were never filed in separate drawers. So, 6 ways we hear God wrong. You wait for the feeling. You audit instead of enrolling. You listen for a voice while ignoring the words. You ask for answers instead of an ear. You bring an offering instead of obedience. You hear it once and never repeat it. And now, go back and read the verse with the word restored. Shema, Israel. Not register this information, Israel. Not agree with this statement, Israel. Hear, Israel. Hear in the way that has hands. And then the next verse, which is what all that hearing was for. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. That is what Shema was carrying the whole time. Not compliance. Love with a body. If this one landed, tell me in the comments which of the 6 is yours. I read them. And if you want a sentence to leave there, leave this one. Lord, give me a hearing heart. Then subscribe, because we are going to keep pulling these words back out of the original text. One last thing, and then I will let you go. If you finished this and felt caught, that is not condemnation talking. In Deuteronomy, God did not hand his people a command and walk away to grade them. He handed it to them at the edge of the land he was already giving them, and then went in with them. He is not asking you to hear perfectly. He is asking you to hear at all.